the Tauros Division version of the Heroes vs. Villains Draft League First Impressions. This video, like the other one, is going to be focused on getting those first impressions of the draft teams, talking a little bit about the strengths and weaknesses of each team, the flavor of each team, who's piloting what team, and just kind of get into the nitty-gritty of it all. I said nitty-gritty a lot in the last video whenever I was switching to the details using the draft planner. So let's jump right in. Before we take a look at the teams, however, I do want to take a look at the logos themselves. We have 12 great team logos, so let's just take a moment to appreciate those logos. We have the Gastrodon's Gambling Association, Radiant Wings, Armada of the Accursed, Slime, which is one of the funnier logos, Marshadow's Backwoods, Musashi's Glycopod Guardians, Crystal Shore's Crusaders, Justice Armory, and the last few I don't think they're going to show on the stream. I'll just do this real quick. There we go. The Skull Foundation, the Moonlit Thieves, Tricky Flowers, and Bucket Buddies. So we're going to dive into each one of these teams individually in the Tauros Division. So without further ado, let's jump in. The first coach we have is Awwon. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. And also, I forgot I should be playing music right now. We have Awwon from Gastrodon's Gambling Association. Let me get some music up real quick. All right, so Awwon from Gastrodon's Gambling Association. This is his first league here in FNF, so I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. Awwon has been a surprisingly fast learner in OU. Usually it takes, I don't know if several weeks is the correct metric. Bloop could probably correct me if I'm wrong, but usually it takes several weeks for someone who's new to FNF Showdown Ladder to kind of actually get any wins or results versus some of the veteran players. But Awwon actually had some nice results versus some of the veteran players in ladder and learned very fast. So I'm excited to see how that translates to draft, especially since we have a curated collection of Pokemon that you need to learn instead of ladder, which is basically like you have to learn every OU viable mon and then some. So anyways, the Tricky Flowers is the nemesis for Awwon, who is being led by Violet. So we'll get into Tricky Flowers later. It's going to be the Week 3 matchup. Let's take a look at this team. We've got Scrafty Mega, Falfrost, Claydol, Anchorage, Shaman, Gramble, Crocky, Swadloon, Gargoliant, Pachirisu, Large Gorgeist, and Shellos. And into the details we go. So looking at these details, we have a physically leaning team with great bulk on both sides, decent stats all around. Let's take a look at the matchup chart. Okay, first things first, the thing that I noticed immediately is that the speed tiers are very good here. You have an over 130, an over 120, an over 110, a 100, and then the 95 through 71. Those are all evenly spread out, so there's not really any gaps in those speed tiers, even down to the lower parts. I don't suspect Swadloon and Shellos would be coming that much, but even down to the lower parts, there's not really one place where you could say there's a huge gap there, so I think this is probably one of the best speed tiers I've seen thus far. And then going into the matchup chart, the Big weakness here being flying. That's not as big a weakness as it might seem, however. The Swadloon pick is kind of dragging down that flying a bit because there is a Pachirisu, a Gargoliant, and an Anchorage there to kind of patch up that flying weakness. Of course, you threaten it offensively with Foul Frost too. Fairy, not really a big weakness either because of these two mons. And Ice a little bit more troubling, but still not a huge weakness. So pretty big, pretty big coverage all around in the defensive side. On the offensive side, you have this beautiful duo of Mega Scrafty and Falfrost. Those are the first two mons that he drafted, and I think that they work hand in hand together, dishing out some threats on the physical side and the special side, and they're both snowballing mons. So that snowball is really what you're going to have trouble stopping with this team. Rev Dance spam, of course, we've seen in FNF Showdown Ladder how intense that could be. And then the Moxie after one Dragon Dance Scrafty Mega. So you have two really potent sweepers who use that snowballing to their advantage. But you also have a decent defensive core here. These four mons here, Claydol through Gramble, they all handle very nice defensively. These two as well, Gorgeist Large and Pachirisu. So there's a lot of defensive mons that could kind of jump around and wall your mons before these two go in for the kill. Of course, you have Anchorage and Gargoliant who dish out big damage on the physical and special side respectively. This team is no slouch offensively. All of the defensive mons can dish out big damage as well. So Anchorage has a good profile versus Ice, but also just hits whatever comes in hard. So if you're trying to Ice Beam this team and Anchorage comes in and you have to switch out, that switch-in is going to get hit pretty hard in the process. And then, for example, Gramble hitting pretty hard with that Intimidate, nice defensive typing in Fairy, but no slouch on the offensive front either. This team is very versatile and has a lot of tools offensive and defensively. I'm not seeing a major weakness on this team. In terms of removal, we have Spin and Rocks Claydol, we have Demolition Anchorage, Demolition Crocky, Defog Gargoliant, and then in terms of setting, we have Rocks Gargoliant and Rocks Claydol. So Claydol we're probably going to be seeing as the main hazard user on this team. In terms of pivoting, we have Pachirisu who could pivot, we have Crocky, and I believe that's it. Not really a big pivot-heavy team. I'd say maybe that is the main weakness of this team, if that's even a weakness. Not that huge a weakness, but I will say this is a very impressive team build. I really like it. I think that Awwon is coming in with the right tools to show why he was put in Tauros Division, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. This is his first performance, so I'm very curious how it shapes up to be. We're going to move on to the next person. In the region's darkest hour, even the smallest glimmer of hope can become a light that shines for all. As long as Captain Chroma stands, hope reigns supreme. We have Captain Chroma of Radiant Wings being led by the one and only beater, a draft league champion, one who has won many a draft league here, so one of the favorite to win this one. We'll see how that shapes up. Beautiful logo done by Rex. I love the color theming here that matches with Dragonair Armored, and Dragonair Armored being a favorite of Beater in general of the custom mons. So definitely love the theming here. We got also that Dragon's Blood trainer sprite, which is really cool. Armada of the Accursed being led by Bloop, who we're going to see very soon, being the nemesis on week 4. Although we could say also another nemesis might be Bucket Buddies due to the devastating snipe during the draft. Recovered from, but that was quite the intense moment. The draft in this division was cutthroat. We threw away all of the friendship of Miltank Division and went right into the cutthroat nature of it all. So before I get ahead of myself, let's look at this team. We have Mega Delta Camrupt, Madame, Serena Delta, Probopass, Dragonair Armored, Houndoom, Virizion, Chinchou, Delta Shieldon, Zeraora, Kricketune, and Starmie. And into the details we go. You get some water before that. All right, special defense being the highest stat on this team, but overall a decent stat spread. Nothing really too weak, HP being the lowest, but not that low considering averages. All right, in terms of speed tiers, we have nice speed spread here. 143 capping off the top. This might be the fastest speed. No, Fly Mulkey is a little bit faster. But one of the faster speeds. There is a little bit of a gap between Zeraora and Starmie where the 130s, 120s are kind of chilling, but I think they still have to run a speed boosting nature. I don't know if they could run Adamant if they're 130 to outspeed Starmie. So not too big a gap, and nice speed tiers here as well. You really gotta prepare for Zeraora. If you're not Scarf or Fly Mulkey, you're probably gonna be outsped by it. Let's take a look at this matchup chart. Beautiful weakness chart there. No red showing at all. Looking at the typical types that are weak, like flying, for example, you have great flying options in Dragonair Armored and Probopass. Zeraora as well, Chinchou as well. Rock is another one that tends to be weak, but again, Probopass, Serena Delta, Virizion honestly hits really well. The only one that is a little bit lacking is Fairy and Fighting, but even then, Probopass being one of the best switch-ins to Fairies, and with Fighting, you have answers in Starmie, Kricketune, and Serena Delta. Serena Delta being the most relevant of those because Starmie and Kricketune aren't that bulky. So Fighting might be the toughest for this team due to the fact that Serena Delta is really the one handling that mantle. But other than that, this looks like a very beautiful matchup chart spread. We're seeing that the Tauros Division players are not messing around with those weaknesses. They do not want to be caught off guard by those flying types like the Miltank Division. Sorry, Miltank Division guys. And let's take a look at the offensive powerhouses on this team, Madame being one of the big ones there. Critical hits on every move when holding stick, and it has Swords Dance. It does have quick attack as well. Good coverage and knockoff and Leaf Blade. Madame is greatly supported by the other mons on this team. Probopass can trap and kill Steals, forcing them to run Shed Shell if they want to escape, which means no leftovers recoveries for them. Probopass is an excellent Pokemon to team up with Madame because of that quality it has. Serena Delta covering Probopass really well because of the fact that Probopass could come in on ice moves, whereas Serena Delta could come in on fighting moves. There are great knock absorbers in general on this team. A lot of these mons don't even fear knock because Probopass has that magnetic stone. You have Mega on Mega Delta Camrupt, Stick on Madame. Serena Delta takes knocks like a champ. Virizion is justified. So this is a team that you don't really want to be spamming knock versus. Even if Delta Shieldon comes out, that knock might be tempting for you, but be careful because Virizion might get that boost from it. The support for Madame does not just stop at Probopass. Mega Delta Camrupt is a great Pokemon to pair with Madame because of the fact that its special attack is so high. Those physical threats that those physical walls that try to stop Madame in its tracks will not be able to take a hit from Mega Delta Camrupt, and of course it could come in with Mountaineer without worrying a bit about taking big damage. We're seeing again on this team that none of the defensive Pokemon are really offensive slouches either. You can make that argument for Chinchou and Delta Shieldon, but they both make up for it in the fact that Delta Shieldon can Toxic anything it wants, and Chinchou has great slow momentum, bringing in the others. Probopass with momentum and Serena Delta with momentum as well. Kricketune, I believe, also gets U-turn. Also Zeraora, so there is a great amount of pivots here. Madame even can pivot. So you're not very... this is not going to be a team that is slow-paced to fight against. Everything can pretty much hit hard. We're seeing Houndoom's debut with Malevolate. I'm super excited for that. Hyper Voice Malevolate hitting very, very hard, especially with that nice special attack boost it got in its buff. Bloop pointing out in chat that the raw bulk is going to need to do a lot of work because there's not much healing on this team. That is true to an extent. Probopass can't heal, nor can Delta Camerupt Mega. There isn't any wish passing on this team, so that is something that this team would like. But I don't think that that's going to be as big a weakness as it might seem due to the fact that this team is pretty hard hitting. These matches aren't going to last very long. This team is nice and balanced, but it definitely ups the offense and packs that offensive pressure to make sure that you don't really have to take that much chip over the course of the game because of the fact that you're bringing in these really hard hitters. We do have some boosting options here and some cool priority in Kricketune. Remember that Kricketune now has priority Encore because Encore is a sound move, so Kricketune is definitely going to be putting in some cool work, at least I hope so. That was the replacement for Terrazbula, which I really wanted to see Beater use Terrazbula. He kind of built his team around using Terrazbula, but I think that Kricketune is really, really great stand-in for that Mon. You have a really cool priority option with it as well. So overall, very beautifully constructed team. I'm really excited to see Madame put in work. Madame is one of those really just highly anticipated Mons in draft for me. So I really like this team personally, and I think that it is going to shine. Speaking of shining and one of the draft regulars and champions, we're going to move on to our next draft here. And our next draft is actually Captain Chroma's Nemesis. The world turns and burns, a never-ending passing of the ages, leaving those from forgotten times to wither away and sink into the world. Left to themselves, those lost souls wander and fester and writhe, a mass of depravity that grows and grows beneath the earth until it breaks open, erupting upon the land. Free to wander the world once more, their existence corrupts the land, bringing all who gaze upon them into madness, thoughtless weapons who only know destruction. That is the story that led us to where we are, and it is the story we shall continue to write. For we are the harbinger of the land's scorn, and we shall not return to rest until all life knows the true depths of despair. We've got the Armada of the Accursed led by Bloop, Harbinger of the Land's Scorn. What an intro that was, and what a nice theming with Spiritomb Mega here. That beautiful logo done by Rex once again. Trainer Sprite by Rex. Radiant Wings being the nemesis. Edgelord much by Void. We love to see it. We love to see the edge. Radiant Wings being the nemesis. That is going to be the battle. We're going to see the battle between Dark and Light, the Armada of the Accursed, versus Radiant Wings. I'm very excited for that battle. Bloop and Beater being some of the big head honchos of draft. So let's move into looking at the team. We've got Spiritomb Mega, Lantern, Shorelorn, Aromatisse, Stucksparse, Skuntank, Delphox, Shieldon, Celesteela, Ladian, Alolan Executor, and Sindel, specifically Sun Eater, as you can see with the skin on the dock. Let's get into the details. Alright, especially leaning team here with speed being the lowest stat, but still all around pretty nice stats, I'd say. Let's see how lacking the speed is. Off the bat, the speed doesn't look too high here. Alright, a funny coincidence I wanted to point out here is that Beater has Delta shield on and Bloop has regular shield on, so we have the villain and hero types kind of switched for that one, which is very funny. Alright, speed tiers. Yeah, so this team does have definitely a Trick Room pocket. Right off the bat, we noticed that with Aromatisse, Executor, Alola, and Mega Spiritomb, who can function in Trick Room. And then on the upper end, we don't have a 120. 118 is the highest it goes. Then we go down to 100 and 104. No 90s either. So there's a little bit of a lack of speed on the top part. Not too dire, I would say. But it is a slight weakness to this team, Shorelorn being the fastest thing here by quite a bit. One thing that I noticed right off the bat is that we have the kind of infamous Spiritomb Mega Shorelorn duo. Bloop has been using this in ladder to good success. What happens is that Shorelorn sets Evanescence to fusion, and then Spiritomb Mega comes in and just takes advantage of those base 110 Phantom Forces. You can't protect versus them, so you have to be prepared to take a Phantom Force and to take a Dark type move, which will trigger Depravity. Very, very tough duo. Of course, Shorelorn also has pivoting, so it makes it one of the perfect partners for Spiritomb Mega. Another great pivoter for Spiritomb Mega is Lantern there. We got double fish going on. Beautiful, fast and slow pivot duo. Ground types are not going to be safe from absorbing those Volt Absorbs, of course, because of Sparkling Water, and then you also have Shorelorn, who can hit them pretty hard as well. Spiritomb Mega is the star of this team, using Depravity to boost itself. It could go into +1 Sucker Punches off of Depravity. It could hit hard with Dark Pulses. It could go mixed. It could use Pursuit to kill things and get a boost while killing those frail Psychics and Ghosts. It could do it all. This is a Mon that you really want to be careful handling. Of course, it also has Taunt and Wisp in case you thought that you could out-offense it with physical Mons or stall it out with a Toxic Wall. And Bloop has shown running some speed on Spiritomb Mega before, so be careful with that. I really do like this little Trick Room pocket here with Executor, Alola, and Aromatisse. Aromatisse is also nice for this team because Misty Terrain blocks Toxic. Toxic is a great way to deal with Spiritomb Mega, but you are not going to be able to Toxic it easily once that terrain is up. Not to mention that Lantern has Heal Bell, just in case you do get that Toxic on Spiritomb Mega. It's not all over yet. Celesteela, a great all-rounder Steel type for this team, can go offensive, can go defensive, and pairs beautifully with Lantern because of the way they cover each other's weaknesses. Celesteela's Leech Seed is going to be really nice here because it could heal for some of the switch-ins of Shorelorn or Spiritomb Mega. Not a huge factor, but something to consider that Celesteela can definitely do that. And then I love Ladian as a pivot here too. This team has a lot of great fast and slow offensive and defensive pivots. Let's take a look at the hazard control. You have Demolition and Moldy Rocks on Suxbar, so you have Shieldon, who could do rocks and spikes. Who else do we have for removal? Defog, Aromatisse, Defog, Skuntank. I believe Ladian gets Defog, not like it really runs it. Fact check me on that if I'm wrong. So decent hazard options as well. Let's take a look at the type chart. Only ground and rock sticking out here. Let's take a look at ground. We have Celesteela, who could come in on ground. We have Ladian. It has Levitate, so kind of. Executor, Alola can come in on ground as well. Ground is probably the bigger weakness here that I would say, because Celesteela is really the main one that you're using for that. Everything else is a little bit more contentious. I mean, Executor Alola also works. And then in terms of rock is handled somewhat decently. The NFEs handle it well. We probably will see Stuxbars coming a lot because that is a really good resistance to have. So ground and rock are the bigger weaknesses of this team. Not too huge weaknesses though, but definitely something that Bloop needs to watch out for. Stuck Sparks being great, especially with Celesteela, they could kind of navigate that on their own. Once again, we have walls that also hit hard. Celesteela being a wall that hits hard. Lantern is probably the weakest of the walls. But still it pivots, so no momentum loss there. Aromatisse being able to hit hard, even uninvested Moonblasts, and Aroma Bomb as well. Overall, very solid team. I think that this team, the one thing it has to watch out for is that ground and rock weakness, and the speed not being as high as the other teams. The other teams tend to have one more speed tier on the top to deal with those speed tiers, but you do have some priority and you have that pocket trick room, so it's definitely navigatable. I'm curious to see how this goes. Bloop is definitely embracing this theme. Villain theme was just made for him. He loves being the problem. So we're going to really see how it goes. I love seeing that huge matchup in week 4. We're going to move on to the next team. I'm going to get some water first. All right. Next we have Slime being headed by Big Slime. This is Colin's team. A very shitposty team. I love how of the villains, this is definitely the one who you don't expect to be a villain, but here he is. I kind of shoved him into the big leagues because I feel like he can do better than he thinks of himself. I think he's a very strong player, and I think that he has what it takes to be one of our powerhouses. His nemesis, Jooj from the Justice Armory, Hammer Arm of the Justice Armory, on week 3, both Spriters who will be kind of OG Spriters, the first Spriters among us who have stuck around. So we're going to see how that goes. Let's take a look at this team here. We got Mega Sableye FNFX, Mag Cargo Armored, Sneasel, Pidgeot, Jolteon, Mr. Mime, Beedrill, Duskull, Gumi, Keldeo, Crocodobie, and Blossom. Into the details we go. Alright, HP being the lowest stat on this team, quite low. Highest being Special Defense. Even spread among the others. Let's take a look and see. Alright, right off the bat, we have a very fast team here. This is a top speed heavy team, over 130 on 130 and over on 2 mons. We have a lot over that 110 range and a 108, 95, 82. Those upper speed tiers are occupied and spread out. Nothing too big between the 82 and 65, but not that big a gap. And of course, Blossom can run speed for Quiver Dance sets. Low speed on the bottom end. You could go Trick Room Macargo Armored if you really wanted to. Don't see that happening on this team because of how speedy it is, but you do have to be careful because if you go Trick Room Mag Cargo Armored can definitely outspeed you. And Corona Mag Cargo Armored is definitely a good option in draft. In ladder, usually you're going to see Flame Absorb, but draft can definitely afford to run it. Let's take a look at that matchup chart. Rocks being the weak thing on this team. Of course, you have Crocodobie, which is the premier rock switch-in. Keldeo also being able to resist rocks with its decent natural bulk. Otherwise, a little bit tough on the rock front. I anticipate Crocodobie coming a lot of these weeks. Ice being the other one. Keldeo being resistant, as well as Mag Cargo Armored. Mag Cargo Armored, a premier ice switch-in, so you kind of have the best of the rock switch-in and the best of the ice switch-in. And then Fairy not too big a problem because Mag Cargo Armored handles Fairy very well. Beedrill, another resist. The rest of the team doesn't handle Fairy too well. I don't know if there's that many offensive Fairies drafted in this league. Serena Delta could definitely be a problem for this team because that Earthquake hits Mag Cargo Armored pretty hard. In terms of the hazard situation, we have Stealth Rock from these two guys here, Sableye, Mega, and Mag Cargo Armored. We also have it from Crocodobie. And for removal, we have Demolition Crocodobie and Defog Pidgeot. Defog, I think, Beedrill, Sweep Up Mr. Mime. I believe that's it. So on the removal front, it's most likely going to be Crocodobie most of these weeks, Demolition being a great tool from it. It switches into rocks nicely, too. Not really many other great removal options, honestly. Mr. Mime does have that pocket sweep up, which is nice, and priority defog Gale Wings. So not too bad. The rock's probably going to go on Mag Cargo Armored. The hazard game isn't amazing on this team, but it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. Beater saying, Serena can put on some pressure. Guess who the only hero not on the schedule is? So the thing is happening again in Miltank Division. I'm like, oh, this matchup might be tough, and then the matchup's not happening. Okay, so Colin definitely dodging a bullet there. Speaking of heroes and villains on the schedule, I'm curious if the Tauros Division knew that heroes would only be facing villains and vice versa. The schedule was released for Miltank Division, but I was very quiet about it. But when I put the schedule up, I was like, I feel like Bloop is going to notice this pattern right off the bat. But yes, every hero only faces a villain, every villain only faces a hero for the regular. Of course, playoffs can be a little different. You might face your fellow heroes or villains. In terms of momentum, there is good momentum on this team with U-Turn Pidgeot. We have Volt Switch, Jolteon, U-Turn, Beedrill, Dry Pass Blossom. You can dry pass that grassy terrain onto something else. I believe Mr. Mime has Dry Pass too. Okay, Bloop didn't even notice. If Bloop didn't notice, then I don't think anybody did, because that's my metric for who notices stuff. In terms of pressure, we have special pressure here from Pidgeot. Of course, Specs Priority Hurricane is great. Oh, Beater, you actually noticed. Okay. Interesting. I don't think you changed your game plan much, though. The one thing I was worried about was that someone would notice and be like, oh, let me build a team that's good on versus the villains or heroes in Grace, but I don't think that didn't really happen, and I don't think you would do that anyways. Where else was I? Okay, so we have Dragon Dance boosting for Sableye Mega X. We have Calm Mind for Mr. Mime, Swords Dance, Beedrill, some boosting options, of course, Quiver Dance for Blossom, Calm Mind for Keldeo. Overall, this team is pretty offensive leaning, has some good defensive options in Crocodobie and Macargo Armored. Other than those two, there's not amazing defensive. Well, no, and Blossom too. But for example, a strong water with water and ice can be tough for this team because Crocodobie and Macargo can't really handle the water, it can handle the ice. Ground and ice can be tough too. Keldeo is a big defensive piece on this team, even though it's not really running defensive a lot of the time, like it's not trying to wall things. It can come in on things and take advantage of those resisted hits to just fire off big moves. So I do think that this team is going to be pivoting around and trying to up the offensive ante a lot so that it doesn't have to take hits, taking advantage of its speed tiers and its priority. Blossom I love on this team. I think that Grassy Surge for Macargo Armored is so nice. I also like Grassy Surge for Keldeo and Mr. Mime. They just appreciate that little healing. Crocodobie not going to like its Earthquakes weakened, but it does have the option of high horsepower. So that is something to keep in consideration. Blossom has just shown to be a draft superstar in general. Galaxy has used it very well, showing that it can both go defensive and offensive, so Blossom is definitely something to look towards. Other than that, I'm curious to see how Colin does in this upper league. He has the chops. He has the chops to do it, and Colin, if you're listening, I believe in you. You got this. All right, we're going to move on to the next player. moment. All right, we're moving into Marshadow's Backwoods here with Cooper. Cooper being the nemesis of Musashi's Golisopod Guardians, who will see very soon. A lot of the nemesis ended up being right next to each other on the dock, which is a funny coincidence. Cooper, another new player for this league. I have not seen Cooper fight. I know that he has his own draft league that he runs, and I was told that he is quite the competent player, so we're going to see how he does. It's going to be a surprise for us all. It seems like he has taken a look into FNF Showdown changes and buffs and things like that, custom mons. So we're going to see how he uses those to his advantage. Let's take a look at this team. We've got Starmie, Mega, Despotide, Rutherium, Sorbot, Licky Licky FNF, Absol, Fortress Delta, Crustle FNF, Lando T, Sable Champ, Cutie Fly, and Bulbasaur. I actually like that he has both Bulbasaur and Sorbot. This is like if Noob Scrub made a team. Let's take a look at the details here. Highest stat being attack. Everything pretty spread out with speed being the lowest. Let's take a look and see if those speed tiers feel that lower speed. You take a little drink before. Stay hydrated, folks. All right. Oh, okay. So we see a big upper speed tier here with 135, but then after that, there's a huge gap between 135 and 104 and 102. That big gap where a lot of the 125s, 120s, 115s reside. Some of those upper speed mons could afford to run Adamant or Modest. A lot of them could afford to put in some more bulk because of the speed creeping, so there's a comfortable gap for his opponents there. And then there's another gap between the 90 and 60. So those 80s and 70s, again, are going to be able to run some bulk or Adamant and Modest because of the fact that there's that huge gap there. Lots of lower speed options here. Crustle, of course, using Shell Smash to make up for that low speed. Not quite a Trick Room team because Fortress Delta and Licky FNF aren't amazing Trick Room abusers. But at least there is that Starmie Mega that caps out the top, which makes the speed a little bit higher. But I would say, at a glance, the speed tiers are a bit of a weakness for this team. In terms of the type chart, we have a really nice stab chart with everything being represented. The weakness chart looks pretty nice. The only problem here is flying. Rutherium and Delta Fortress being a very good switch into flying, though, so not as bad as it may seem. You have the weaknesses here, mostly on the lower end, actually, so these mons probably won't be coming that much. Sable Champ and Crustle FNF. Crustle FNF can offensively threaten flying types after a Shell Smash, so the flying weakness, not as bad as it seems on paper. Ice is the other one, but that is really heightened by a Lando T. Otherwise, there are some good resists there. So Ice is not too huge a problem. Let's look at Rock because that tends to be the other problematic one. Sorbot handling that and Sable Champ. Rock is covered pretty well. So type chart looking good for this team. In terms of offensive pressure, we of course have Despotide, who has shown that it can dish out big damage here. Fairies are not safe. Nothing is really safe from Despotide. Swords Dance, Despotide being a huge threat. I believe it's also his Z-Mon, so has that option of Z Outrage as well. Starmie Mega, a good complement. We have that double huge water spam. Sorbot being able to come in as well as Rutherium when they're in danger. And of course, it takes those moves that might hit them hard, like Fairy or Electric, very well. In terms of removal, we have Rapid Spin, Demolition, Rapid Spin, Defog on Cutie Fly if you want to count that. And in terms of hazards, we have Stealth Rock on Rutherium, Stealth Rock on Lando, and that's it, I believe. But that's an amazing hazard game. Those are both mons that do not mind running rocks at all. Great removal options. Lando has the option of going offensive or going rocks if it wants to, because Rutherium can fill in the other role with the hazards. So very nice little duo there. In terms of special attacking, aside from Starmie, you don't really have much special threats. I mean, I don't want to say that Rutherium isn't a special threat, because it definitely can choose to run offense, especially if you throw those rocks on Lando. But aside from that, Starmie is really the one holding the mantle of special threats. So special walls aren't that necessary here, although Starmie Mega, of course, is really hard to handle when Lantern is only on one team. And physical threats are really the big one. Despotide, Lando T, Sable Champ can do a physical set. Absol. This team definitely leans physical. So it's a little bit of a slower team overall and not as specially offensive, but it does have great options for its defensive picks. Let's take a look at the momentum here. We have Dry Pass Rutherium. We have Volt Switch, Fortress Delta, U-Turn, Lando T. So some decent pivot options. And some nice boosting options as well. Like we mentioned, the Despotide earlier. Rutherium can boost Absol, Lando, and of course Crustle FNF, Sable Champ too, and Cutie Fly. You might see the Pocket Cutie Fly. Speaking of Cutie Fly, Sticky Web can be a way that this team overcomes its speed problem. You could Sticky Web and then you could go for Spin on Mega Starmie as that hazard removal option. So don't think that it's all doom and gloom for the speed tiers for this team, because it definitely has that option as well. Overall, a pretty good team for someone who is a first timer here in FNF with FNF Draft Leagues. I'm really curious to see how he does. He's the only other completely new person in this division. So let's root for Cooper and hope that he has a good time. And yeah, that's now it's on him to show us what he's got. We're going to move on to the next one here. The Galysopod Guardians are a team of reformed criminals and other interesting individuals, sponsored by Musashi, to allow them to put their talents to use in a constructive manner. So I love the theming of this one. We have some delinquents, one might say, moving on to the heroes side thanks to Musashi's recruitment efforts. And of course, better late than never. The technically not late because he gave it in yesterday. But I love that trainer sprite with the Galysopod drip. Very cool. Oh yeah, I could remove that dead pixel. But yeah, really awesome sprite. And a very cool logo too with Musashi, and then you got the Haunch Crow feathers. This is the nemesis of Marshadow's Backwoods. So Cooper, who we just saw in the last analysis. Let's take a look at the team real quick. Haunch Crow, Mega Kiwit, Ignajar Armored, Primarina, Pickpossum, Darmanizen, Throw, Chinchou FNF, Vikavolt FNF, Metagross, Garbodor, and Cranidos. Looking into the details here. That attack shining through. 102 as an average is an extremely high average, so we have an offense leading team here, but the other stats looking very good too. Nothing too low, speed being the lowest. Let's take a look at the speed tiers. All right, 135. That's a really nice speed tier to cap out at because you outspeed the 135s, which is a common tier up in that top section. 122, nothing in the 110s, but we have a 105 and then 96. Decent spread. You usually want to have something in that 115, 110 range, but not terrible since you have the 122 and 105. Then we're going down into the lower speeds, 96 to 75. A little bit of a gap there. Nothing too huge. We definitely have a Trick Room option here with Darmanizen, Vikavolt, Throw, Primarina. That's a pocket Trick Room right there, actually. The main centerpiece of this team is the bird spam. That's what he built his team around. Honchkrow, Mega, and Kiwi. Together, they are very hard to wall, especially because Kiwi not only complements Honchkrow in being able to use Leaf Blade on those rocks, being able to use high horsepower on steals, but it also has Offensive Kiwi, a tool that is not super utilized yet. Natural Gift. Kiwi can use Natural Gift with its berry, and Ambrosia prevents its berry from being knocked and from being used up by Natural Gift. So with Natural Gift, you have the option to do very strong, for example, fire type moves with Oka Berry. So if your opponent, let's say, has a Pharaoh Thorn or has a Celesteela, you could fire off those very strong fire natural gifts on Kiwi, which is a very nice ability to have in draft. Kiwi pairs very nicely with Honchkrow Mega, but they're not the only two on this team. You also have Ignajar Armored, who can fire off those strong ice and rock moves in case you're facing off against other flying types that might threaten them. Accelerock being great in that department as well. Primarina acting as a nice bulky fairy and water. Garbodor single-handedly winning the Hazards game. We don't even have to look at anything else for Hazards because Garbodor means that you win the Hazards game. We've seen through and through that Garbodor can just eliminate Hazards and stick around for a long time with Aggregate, as well as setting its own Hazards, vomiting spikes as much as it wants. Of course, you also have Moldy Rocks with Throw, which is a great thing to have. Demolition and Rocks with Vikavolt. Rocks on Metagross as well, and Rocks on Ignajar Armored. This is just a Hazard-winning team. And that is great for this team because Honchkrow and Kiwi appreciate being able to come in without taking hazard damage. Ignajar Armor too, of course. This team wins the hazard game. Don't even try. Don't even try with this team with the hazards because you are going to lose the hazard game. This team has some great answers for Rock. Namely Vikavolt, FNF, and Metagross, which is good for Honchkrow and Kiwi. Yes, Bloop pointing out that Darm likes no hazards as well. It likes to pivot around and hit hard, come in and threaten those physical walls with its hard-hitting special moves, so yes, that is true. Rock is the weakness on this team according to the type chart, but don't let it fool you too much, because you have some really great rock switches here, so it's not really a big weakness. Kiwi can also go Charty Berry to be able to come in on things like Stone Edge, and it becomes the perfect Edge Quake immune on. Completely immune to rock and ground, which is such a good quality to have in draft. Of course, you also want that Yache Berry so that you can deal with ice. Ice being a little bit of a weakness for this team on the top part, but then again, you have resists in Primarina, in Metagross, and in Darmanitan. So this team does not really have big weaknesses. So let's take a look at the pivoting situation here. You have U-turn from Kiwi, you have U-turn from Pickpossum, U-turn from Darmanitan as well. Volt switch on these two guys. Great pivot options. Boosting at the top level too. Ignajar Armored being able to run Sword Stance. You also have Calm Mind Darmanitan, or does it get Calm Mind? Someone fact check. I think it does. If not, oops. You have Bulk Up on Throw, which is a fun option. Some priority options as well, Accelerock and Bullet Punch. Not too much in the boosting for the upper level, but Moxie is a really cool way to boost for Honchkrow. Does it get Sword Dance? I feel so bad for asking that. I should know that. So not much of a boosting team, but it does hit really hard. And I am so excited to see Pickpossum's debut. Debut of Pickpossum since the last event. And its ability, Swindler, can come in on walls that try to recover, or it could come in on screens and just steal those away, and then you could keep up that momentum by U-turning out. You could knock off. It also has its Z option, so don't get too comfortable swords dancing versus this team, because you can get that boost stolen from you with Pickpossum. So that is a very, very cool player on this team. Oh, work up on Ignajara Armored, which is pretty neat. So yeah, this is just a team that hits really hard. It wants to bring in Honchkrow, just obliterate. It could also bring in Darmanazan, keep up the momentum. This is a really cool bird spam team. Very excited to see some of these mons. Kiwi with its Berry Unshackled. You also have Bountiful Kiwi as an option, which is a very, very fun option. And then Pickpossum's debut, Honchkrow Mega's debut. Just a really cool team all around. Very excited for this team. Yes, Honchkrow Mega had Gale Wings before. That actually held up the draft a little bit, because Ezla was like, oh yeah, I want to repeat Gen 6, so let's do Honchkrow. And then I was like, wait, what do you mean by that? I think you mean Gale Wings, and I got something to tell you, brother. But he decided to go through with it anyways. As was saying, he wished he had slow momentum for Pickpossum. I mean, you do. You have Chinchou and Vigavol FNF. Vigavol FNF can Volt Switch, and you have U-Turn on Darmanazan. Those are both slow Pokemon that could bring in Pickpossum pretty nicely. So I would say you do have slow momentum options for it. All right, let's take a look at the next team. All right, in comes the Crystal Shores Crusaders. This is a favorite of mine. This is a team headed by Galaxy, and as you can see, it's themed around Pacimiturn, which is a custom mon that hasn't been implemented into the server, but hopefully one day will be. We'll see. I made the trainer sprite, and then Rex did such an amazing job on this logo. It is one of my all-time favorites. This is Pacimiturn Man of the Crystal Shores Crusaders, who is nemesis with Bucket Buddies. That is Zqiggs' team, the pale pal of the Bucket Buddies. That's going to be a Week 2 Nemesis matchup. Let's take a quick look at the team before we go on to the details. Oh, also he has Mega Hypno, so of course I can't help but stand. All right. Speaking of which, we got Mega Hypno, Robodachi, Armored Typhlosion, Lugito, Withered Celebi, Fione, Passimian, Ferroseed, Tapu Koko, Hydreigon, Blockadile, and Meryl. The signature Meryl, of course, always with the Meryl on his team. He and his nemesis actually have both signature low-tier water types in Meryl and Corsola, which is fun. Taking a look at the stats, it's more of a offensive on the physical side team. Special is the lowest stat, special attack at 78. Pretty decent spread all around though. Let's take a look and see those speed tiers. Alright, once again we have the 130 position occupied by Tapu Koko, and then there's a big gap there of 130 and 110. Not a huge gap because it's nice to have a 110, but 120 is definitely appreciated when it comes to speed tiers in draft. Still, not terrible. 130 is a very nice upper tier to have. Then you have a couple hundreds, 98 and 95, going down to the 80s and 70s. A little bit of a gap there between Hypno Mega and Blockadile, but nothing too crazy. And then the lower end Ferroseed being 10. In terms of the type chart, we have a beautiful looking type chart here with no weaknesses except ground being at 0. Let's take a look at that ground weakness. Lugito handling ground and Hydreigon with Levitate. Witherbee also resisting ground, so actually not too bad of a weakness there. In terms of flying, which is the other one I'm just automatically looking at because of how flying hasn't been addressed in the other division. Handled pretty well by Tapu Koko, Blockadile, and Robodachi, of course, which is a premier resist for flying types. Let's take a look at the defensive capabilities. We have Hypno Mega synergizing well with Lugito because it could come in on those knockoffs. In terms of Ghost, you have Hydreigon and Robodachi. So you have Hypno Mega's weaknesses covered really nice. Hypno Mega and Robodachi is actually a great duo because they could come in on each other's weaknesses. Typhlosion Armored rounding that out nicely with the fire types being covered. Robodachi also handling things nicely with Lugito because Lugito can come in easily on fighting types. Robodachi handling those electric types with Volt Absorb. So the terrain that Coco sets is actually going to benefit this team, but you're not going to get much benefit from it yourself because of Robodachi blocking those electric type attacks. In terms of hazards, we have Rocks from Celebi Withered, we have Spikes from Ferroseed, Rocks from Block It Out. Celebi Withered probably going to be a utility mon most of the time because of the fact that it could set rocks, and there's not really other rock setters that want to come most of the time on this team. In terms of removal, we have Defog Lugito, Defog Celebi Withered, Defog Tapu Koko, and Hydreigon. I don't believe that Block It Out gets Demolition. I think it's just Crocodobie. Funnily enough, Bloop says the ghost fighting coverage matchup is rough. Agreed, ghost fighting is tough for this team to face. It is hard to find stab ghost fighting, but a ghost with like hidden power fighting can go really hard in this matchup for sure. Let's take a look at the offensive threats. Robodachi, is it Z any? It is, so we have the threat of Z Celebrate Robodachi. We also have Passimian, which is a great pivot. On the offensive side, those are really the big ones. Celebi Withered can be offensive, and then on the and Hypno Mega, of course, can go offensive. Usually a defensive piece, usually a both. Can do Swords Dance, can do Bulk Up. And then on the Bloop saying also, I think the only not NFE shadow, not shadowed with removal is Stuxparse with Devo. Yeah, I think Stuxparse is the only one that gets it. There might be one more, but I'm not sure. And then on the special side, we have Hydreigon, we have Fion who could boost up, we have Typhlosion Armored. Witherby can do both. Lugito can actually do a surprising special set. Robodachi can do special. There's a lot of versatility on this team. There's a lot of mons that could kind of go either way. Tapu Koko can go either way as well. Usually leans special, but can pull out that nice physical set. And can go defensive if it wants to. This team has a lot of interesting and unique options with its mons. A lot of them being able to go on either side of the spectrum. Some good pivot game here with U-turn on these three guys. You have Parting Shot on Typhlosion Armored, Dry Pass, U-turn on Hydreigon, Volt Switch on Tapu Koko. Lots of pivot spam here. So this team has great momentum. Overall, this team is looking really nice. I like the composition here. Violet pointing out Bunnelby, Mudspray, Fracture, and Laron also get demo. So some NFEs get demo. I'm really curious to see Witherby. I think that it's a really fun mon in draft. It has a lot of cool utility options. It's no slouch offensively either. It can go Swords Dance, Power Whip. That's the nice thing about this team. There's so many options on this team. Ghost fighting is definitely what this team wants to watch out for because ghost fighting can handle both Hypno Mega and Robodachi, Hydreigon as well. So if you are ghost fighting, that special ghosts can be tough to handle for this team. But there are ways around it, and I think with all of the momentum that this team has, you could try to put those mons that try to take advantage of that weakness in a rough spot where they have to either switch out or take big damage. This is a team I'm rooting for obvious reasons. And welcome Galaxy. You've shown yourself to be possibly number 4 of the big 3. You've really pulled your weight in draft leagues and shown that you have what it takes to really be a top contender. So I hope that you bring that this time and move into playoffs with that in mind. We're going to go on to the next team, but before we do that, I am going to very quickly go and refill my water. This is a reminder to everybody to stay hydrated. I'm in Arizona. I can't dry up, so I will be right back. I'll be just a minute, and then we're going to move on to Jooj's team. In the meantime, take a nice look at that beautiful logo. Okay, we are back. We are moving on to the Justice Armories. Halls of Justice painted green, money talking. Power wolves beset your door, hear them stalking. Soon you'll please their appetite, they devour. Hammer of Justice crushes you, overpower. Justice Armory being led by Hammer Arm. This is Jooj's team. Nemesis being Slime. That's Colin's team in week 3. Very awesome sprite here. This logo is a proof of concept. Jooj is on vacation, so once he gets back, he's going to be setting up the colors and digitizing that logo so that it looks all nice. But he did get the style points for it, so looks great so far. I'm excited to see. I like that kind of crest-like design. Gonna take a look at this team. Mega Garchomp, Hawlucha, Rapidash, Armored Roserade, Clefgar, Miltank, Clang, Steenie, Raichu, Vikavolt, FNF Sableye, and Clawitzer. So, I'm gonna go into the details. Overall, an even spread here, HP being the lowest stat. Okay, looking at the speed tiers, we have 135, 118, 111, 110, and 100. That's a nice spread. Nothing in between 135 and 118. That's a little bit of a gap, not too big a gap though. Rapidash is a really nice upper speed tier, and once again we're seeing the Tauros Division serious about hitting that 130 and above benchmark. A lot of 135s. So I think that Beater is probably happy here to have the 143 Zeraora. Nice even spread on that middle end too, nothing too crazy. There's no huge gaps there. And in terms of the type chart, we have a decent spread of stab, only missing Psychic and Ice, and then the weakness being Ice. Let's take a look at that Ice weakness more closely. We have Rapidash, Clang, Miltank with Thick Fat, and Clawitzer. The Ice weakness might be actually tough for this team to handle because of the fact that Clang is probably the best ice counter on this team, Rapidash not too defensive, and Miltank is really going to want to balance its 3 abilities. Of course, Thick Fat is a great ability on Miltank, but it also wants to run Sap Sipper sometimes and Scrappy sometimes. I think Sap Sipper is probably the least needed considering how resilient this team is to grass, but Scrappy is great for running Rapid Spin on a webs-based team such as this one with Vikavolt, who can spew out webs. You really like having that Scrappy Rapid Spin so that you could spin even on ghosts. Miltank has that unique ability to do so. In terms of hazard removal, we actually have quite a few spinners. We have these 3 spinners back-to-back, Steenie, Clang, and Miltank. Of course, Miltank being the premier spinner of the trio. We have Defog on Vikavolt, and we also have Defog on Hawlucha. We also have a lot of nice spin prevention. So we have Defog blocking Hawlucha. We have spin blocking Sableye FNF, who could also set rocks in the process. In terms of other setters, we have Rocks on Sableye, FNF, and Garchomp Mega. We also have Spikes on Hawlucha, Spikes on Roserade Armored. We have Rocks on Miltank, question mark, actually fact check me there. Rocks on Clefgar. Overall, this team has an amazing hazard game. Great hazard game, and of course the aforementioned webs on Vikavolt. So this team has a great hazard game both in setting and preventing the removal of its own hazards and removing hazards only on its side. One thing I really like about Rapidash is that it has Territorial. Territorial will remove terrain, it will remove screens, and it will remove diffusions when sent out. One thing to take note of that I didn't mention before is that diffusions can be removed with Defog. So in Gen 7, Defog does not remove terrains, but it will remove diffusion. Diffusion can also be removed by setting up a different diffusion, but of course we only have one diffusion right now, so that is not a possibility. In terms of the offensive threats, Rapidash is actually very nice. Hawlucha, Garchomp, Mega, Roserade, Armored, even Clefgar is no offensive slouch. Swords Dance or Banded Raichu does great on webs. Great pivot for webs teams, of course, with Clawitzer, with Propulsion Shot. This team has nice momentum, it has nice abusers, it has nice offensive threats. I really like the build of this team the more I look at it, because it is so offensive in nature and it really keeps you on your toes. It makes you ask if you want to risk trying to remove hazards, which is going to be hard in itself, or if you just deal with them. And considering sticky webs is one of the hazards that this team can abuse, you're going to have to deal with something really tough, because once you have Garchomp Mega and Clawitzer and Raichu abusing those webs, you're going to be on the back foot. Of course, it also has great options for those flying types that ignore webs, Raichu being there and Vikavolt being there, Sableye being a great defensive option for flying moves. And then you also have nice priority in Extreme Speed Raichu, and I thought there was one more. I guess there isn't. So there's a priority option there. Overall, very cool team and a very Jooj-coded team. I know he really wanted Clefgar. He got that round 3 Clefgar, like Bloop pointed out earlier, so I'm very curious to see how he uses Clefgar. Very cool draft mod. That can kind of go defensive or offensive depending on the matchup. Fusions in general, just bringing that really awesome swagger to draft. Yeah, I'm really excited to see how this goes. Jooj also showing us that Hawlucha Tier 1 is worth it. All the doubters who thought that Hawlucha losing Unburdened to get Jetstream was not worth it, it is worth it, okay? Hawlucha has proven itself to be a premier hazard removal block, and its new move, or rather its rework of Flying Press, extremely good in handling flying types and hard to switch into. Flying Press with Acrobatics is very hard to switch into. So this is an offensive, up the ante offensive team, and I'm very excited to see how it does. Jooj, of course, being one of the big 3 of draft, so we'll see if he can hold that mantle. Okay. On to our next one. We've got the Skull Foundation, headed by Lunch. This is a vigilante style, kind of delinquent style hero affiliation. A lot of the normally villainous assumptions you might have about Team Skull or about his mascot, Makalola, are subverted on this team. The nemesis being the Moonlit Thieves, Rifk, who we're going to see next after this, mascot of Alolan Muck, and he's got that nice Alolan Muck hairstyle on his trainer sprite. We've got the Skull Foundation there. Very lore-heavy team and player overall, which I really appreciate. I love that lore heaviness. So let's take a look at the team. Mega Go-Goat, Archibot, Flymolky, Blissey, Fortress, Frostlass, Hitmonwoo, Skiploom, Wigglytuff, Alolan Muck, Seismitoad, and Typhlosion. taking a look at the details. Oh yeah, Lunch and Jooj right next to each other as well. Alright, HP being the highest at 100. We have a lot of high HP mons on this team. Defense being the lowest, probably because of Blissey there. But overall, still a nice even spread of those stats. Let's take a look at the team itself. So first things first that I want to point out. This is the first time we're seeing in draft Blissey Wigglytuff. Blissey Wigglytuff, folks. That is a premier special wall being paired with its physical variant. I think that Wigglytuff has proven itself to be the physical Chansey of this mod. Wigglytuff is incredibly tough to plow through on the physical side. So you're going to have to pick whether you want to thud into Blissey or whether you want to thud into Wigglytuff. And just in case you had the idea of using poison or steel moves against Wigglytuff to plow through, there's Fortress right there to stop you. I will say that I do think that this team would have loved a bulky ghost type to take advantage of that ghost immunity from these two pink blobs, but also to come in on the fighting moves that threaten Blissey. Wigglytuff is a pseudo fighting resist, but it still is neutral. So if you have like a Swords Dance close combatter, they may be able to plow through Wigglytuff still. So that is one area that I think would have helped this team. Frostlass is just not bulky enough to be a bulky ghost, like for example Cough Regis is. But overall, I think this team has a great defensive profile with Blissey, Wigglytuff, Fortress as well, Muckalola no slouch, and neither is Seismitoad. Let's take a look at that type chart. Ice being a big weakness, Typhlosion, Fortress, and Frostlass are the resists. The big one of note there being Fortress. This is a classic Lunch phenomenon where every team he manages to build somehow has a very big ice weakness. But if it's a special ice attacker, Blissey could come in. If it's a physical one, Wigglytuff could come in. So you have that. And of course, Fortress being a nice resist. Let's take a look at the flying weakness here. Archibot being the only resist. That is a little troublesome because Archibot is not very defensive. Of course, Blissey could take Hurricanes, and Wigglytuff could take Brave Birds with that Rocky Helm and big HP recoil, but that is something to really take into consideration. Flying looks tough here. Let's take a look at the others. Fire, little hard with Flymolky and Seismitoad, and Typhlosion being the only resist. Seismitoad a nice resist there. Flymolky just a little too frail to take those powerful flying moves. And then Rock being the other one. Go-Goat, an excellent resist there. Hitmonwoo and Seismitoad. So Rock is a little bit better off because it has better resists. This team has an interesting defensive situation here where you have a great defensive duo in Wigglytuff and Blissey, which is bolstered by the others that could come in like Fortress and Muckalola. But then you also have type-wise a little bit of trouble. So it really is going to be a test of that ironclad duo of Blissey and Wigglytuff if they can be pseudo-resists despite taking attacks neutrally. Mixed attackers might be a problem for this team as well because Blissey and Wigglytuff can easily be hit on their lower stat. Now let's take a look at the speed tiers. We have the highest speed we've seen so far in Flymolky at 150. 150 being an excellent speed tier considering that a lot of the others decided to go for 130s, 135s, and in Beato's case 143. So 150 rules them all. Flymolky can really get that snowball going with volatility. There's also 128, 115, 110, 197. A nice spread there. Nothing in the 130s, but you beat those 130s with Flymolky, so not too big a deal. Big gap here between 97 and 77 on Hitmonwoo and Seismitoad. Not too dire a gap though. Those 95s to 80s could be able to run some bulk, but nothing too crazy. Hitmonwoo also has that pseudo scarf with Quick Feet, and I'm really excited to see how Hitmonwoo does after the buff. We buffed its special attack a little bit, and I think its defense actually got a little bit of a boost. Nothing crazy. I mean, it's still like 50, 60 defense or something, so it's not taking any hits on that side. The offense on this team is really nice. Remember, only one team gets Lantern, and Archibot hits very hard outside of that. I do believe it's also one of his Z captains. Yes, it is. Z attack Archibot can fire off very powerful thunder crashes and it can also take advantage of its great mixed move pool and decent special attack to be a mixed attacker. In case you had any ideas of walling it, Flying Monkey, of course, can boost with Nasty Claw or Swords Dance or Dragon Dance. Really big question mark on there. You have to kind of prepare for everything. In terms of the special side, Typhlosion hits really hard, so does Hitmonwoo. And then we can't forget Go-Go Mega, who hits very hard on the physical side. Very nice tank. Let's take a look at the pivoting Volt Switch. U-turn, Volt Switch. I think Hitmonwoo gets U-turn, someone fact check me there. U-turn on Skiploom as well. So we have some nice pivot options, which is good at bringing in some of those hard hitters or frail mods. Okay, it does. In terms of hazard game, we have Spin on Fortress, Defog on Flymolky, and Archibot. We have Defog on Skiploom, question mark. And then for setting, we have Flymolky, Blissey, Wigglytuff, Fortress, who could also set spikes, Frostlass, who could also set spikes, and Seismitoad. Great setting options. Spinning is most likely going to be handled by Fortress, but we do have some pocket defog options as well. You can go a more utility offensive Flymolky with defog 3 attacks, something like that. And then Go-Go might get Demolition. Oh, Flymolky gets Demolition. Oh, Hitmonwoo gets Rapid Spin too. It's a good thing I didn't miss that. So Hitmonwoo is actually a decent spinner too. You could run Spin 3 attacks. This team has a lot of snowball potential with Flymolky, of course. Nice boosting. You could go boosting with Frostlass. And it loves to try and prevent you from removing hazards with Frostlass, who could take advantage of that defog boost with competitive. No Ghost to spin block, which I think this team would have liked. You could also run a cheeky competitive Wigglytuff to come in on defogs, which is fun. But it does spin its hazards away, so it likes to keep hazards up on the other side, and it does have plenty of hazard options. Overall, this team looks like it's pretty decently balanced. I think the big question for this team is going to be how the defensive situation handles out. Will Wigglytuff and Blissey be able to cover this team's weaknesses to Ice, for example, Flying, Fire, somewhat Rock as well? Or will their raw bulk not be enough? That is the question of the day. Violet mentioned earlier that Greninja kind of stunts on this team. I do think that Greninja and other mixed attackers can be really tough for this team. It'll kind of just have to out-offense this team, bringing in those offensive mons with the slow pivots and whatnot. The defensive mons on this team aren't super huge slouches. We're seeing that as a theme in this division. Blissey might be the biggest slouch offensively, but of course Seismic Toss gets that nice, consistent damage. Will they ever fight Greninja? At the moment, no, because Violet is also a hero, so no fight unless it's in playoffs for Greninja. So nice little bullet dodged by Lunch there. But yeah, I think this is a nice signature Lunch team. Lunch, you could do this, pretend Ice doesn't exist. Or switching your Blissey to special and Wigglytuff to physical. There you go. But yeah, this is going to be a really cool team. I'm super excited to see Flymolky show off a little bit more. It's a very nice draft mon. I do sleep on it a little bit because its initial power isn't that big, but it does have that great speed, huge bag of a move pool, and nice volatility snowballing. So we're going to see how that goes when it comes down to it. One final thing I will say is that this is a themed team with... Lunch telling me in chat, I missed Frostlass as a spin blocker. Yeah, there's a ghost right there. I'm so dumb. I was thinking earlier about lacking a bulky ghost for that to come in on fighting for Blissey and Wigglytuff, but Frostlass is a spin blocker, so my bad. Lunch corrected me. Yeah, so you can block that spinning. You can take advantage of the defog. Frostlass has that really cool kit there. It is frail, so it's a risky mon to do it with, but it is very cool. Anyways, one thing I wanted to mention was that this team is very themed as well. You have some, of course, classic Lunchmon like Archibot, but you also have Brooksmon in Flymolky. You have Hajime's Hitmonwoo right there. You have Seismitoad, which is Enrique's mon, just not the Delta variant. And then, of course, Go-Go Mega for that Qasim and Noor representation. So just a lot of really cool story representations on this team, which I like. So fun team that plays around with hazards, has good momentum, a dastardly pink blob defensive duo, and good firepower and snowballing. We're going to see how this goes. Very curious on this team. This is one of the more interesting teams of this division. So Lunch, show us what you got. Going to move on to the next one. All right, here come the Moonlit Thieves, headed by the Lore Keeper. This is Rifk's team, and they are the nemesis of Lunch. So once again, we have back-to-back nemesis facing the School Foundation in Week 2. Rifk, another one who has shown that they have the chops to be in this division. Rifk had a very funny, hopefully funny in hindsight to them, schedule last time, facing just the toughest opponents and still managing to get into playoffs with tough opponents and hard matchups. So Rifk, you are also in the running to be one of those top contenders of leagues, and I hope that you show this time with not as brutal of a schedule. Still a pretty tough schedule, all things considered, but you got this, definitely. Ghost Master here, so we're putting on the Haunted House from Pokken as the theme. Let's take a look at this team. We've got Mega Scizor, Mightyena, Sylveon, Deltastini Armored, Dragalge, Primeape Armored, Mesprit, Watchog, Tornadus Therian, Portamora, Grubbin, and Muzzleep, which once again we have our starter here. This is Hana, which is Rifk's Muzzleep, and with Carmelot being drafted in the other division, we have all three starters picked, which is very nice. All right. In terms of stats, special defense being the highest, but an even spread among these, speed and HP being the lowest. All right, we're going to take a look at the speed tiers first really quick. I'm just going to drink some water. Hydrate, folks. Hydrate. Okay, topping off the speed tiers, we have Tornadus Therian 121. A nice upper speed tier, although in this division, not the best. This division, we've seen most players have a 130 and above Mon, so this is actually a lower speed team, considering Watchog is the only one at 108, the rest of them being on the lower end. Pretty even spread from 90 downward, but there is that gap between the 108 and the 90. Not the best speed tiers here, and not really a pocket Trick Room team because of the fact that Portamora, being one of the slower ones, and Muzzleep don't really take advantage of Trick Room that well. In terms of priority, you do have Mightyena, Sucker Punch, and Bullet Punch Scizor, so that does help. But a little bit lower on the speed tiers here. Let's take a look at the matchup chart. This is probably the matchup chart that has the most struggles defensively of this league, primarily flying. If you can see here, this is a no flying resist team, which seems like a bit of a death sentence, especially versus Bird Spam. Ezla's the first opponent in Week 1, and unlike all of the other matches we had here, matchups that seem a little doomsday we had on stream, this one is actually happening, and it's happening very soon. It's the Week 1 matchup, so Rifk is going to have to find a way to deal with flying types. That's going to be the big question of this team. Specs Hurricane can just let it rip. Brave Bird hits extraordinarily hard. We're also going to look at this fire weakness. We have Dragalge and Portamora. The fire weakness is amplified by that 4 times weakness of Scizor and the 2 NFEs being weak. So the fire weakness is actually not as bad as it seems. Portamora and Dragalge are excellent switches into fire, so I'm not too worried about the fire weakness on this team. Fairy being a weakness, but Scizor handles that really well. One thing that fairies can do, though, is run Hidden Power Fire, so definitely be careful of that. Zqiggs is a pseudo fairy resist. It takes fairy moves pretty nice and threatens them well. Fairy, not too bad, but still a notable weakness. And then the last one being Ice. Scizor being one of the best Ice counters. Of course, Hidden Power Fire does have some trouble there. And then Portamora being another Ice resist. Ice is a tough one for this team in general because that's a lot of weight to have on Portamora and Scizor. Overall, though, it's very doable. Portamora can handle Hidden Power Fire well. So I would say the only Doomsday one is Flying. The type chart isn't as bleak for the others as it may seem, but Flying is really that big one. In terms of pivoting, we have some great pivots. We have U-Turn, Mega Scizor, Parting Shot, Mightyena, Dry Pass on Sylveon, U-Turn on Steenie Delta Armored, U-Turn on Primeape Armored, Mesprit with U-Turn. I think even Watchog gets U-Turn or Dry Pass. U-Turn Tornadus, Dry Pass, Portamora. We are just, maybe even Volt Switch Grubbin? We are just chock full of pivots here. Almost every member on this team has a pivoting move, which is great, especially Sylveon passing those fat wishes to Zqiggs and Portamora in particular. You could go into Scizor Mega as well to recover some lost HP, get a Swords Dance going. Parting Shot is great for this team and in general because you could really bring in Mega Scizor to take advantage of that with Swords Dance. Not a ton of other boosters here. I think it's really Mega Scizor that's the big one. One thing I want to point out too, this team is definitely very nice for Mega Scizor. Primeape Armored sets that grassy terrain when using grass moves, which is great for Mega Scizor. Gives that residual healing and gives it a ground resist, which means that it is an edge quake resist that also resists ice. It just kind of bolsters Mega Scizor a lot, especially defensive Mega Scizor. One thing that you have to worry about with this team is that Mightyena hits extremely hard. We've all seen it, we all know it. It was banned to OU Plus for a reason, and fairies can't really comfortably come in because Mightyena could go for that Parting Shot and bring in Mega Scizor and Zqiggs to hit those fairies really hard. One thing that I am curious about is that Z Watchog, Z Any, that is probably a Z Hypnosis Watchog with those Illuminate Hypnosises, which hit a little bit more accurately. You get that speed boost, and then you could go into a Nasty Plot and let her rip. On ladder, it has definitely a 4-move slot syndrome because it wants to fit so much coverage, but in draft, you could kind of pick the 2 moves that work best for you and synergize well with Nasty Plot. And then we also have Primeape Armor's first debut in draft, which I'm very curious about. I am not sure if this Mon is it or not. Rifk is going to have to show us. We're going to have to see if Primeape Armor is as good as it might hypothetically be with Verdant Blessing, or if it just can't, if it doesn't have the tools to set that up. Let's take a look at the hazard game. We have Defog, Spin, Defog. And then in terms of the setting, we have Rocks and Spikes. So great removal. Only 2 setters, I believe. Oh, and Webs on Grubbin. Don't forget Grubbin. I'll double check there. Spikes on Muzzleap as well, and Toxic Spikes on Zqiggs. So some options for both. I suspect it's mostly going to be a Mesprit Rock situation since that is the only really robust rocker here. So Mesprit is kind of shoehorned into that role, which it doesn't mind taking that much. Mesprit usually does run defensive. So yeah, this team definitely is built around pivot spam, getting Scizor Mega in, and it can pivot itself, it can Swords Dance, and then clean up after all that pivoting, handle the hazards decently well with removing them with your defoggers here or your spinner. Steenie Delta Armored also looking like a nice little glue to this team. Flying is what this team really needs to watch out for. I think that the flying weakness is going to force this team to go on the offensive a lot so that it can't really be taken advantage of in that respect. There are still ways to get around the flying with raw bulk on Portamora and Scizor, but you're really going to have to account for that in all of your battles. One last thing I'll say is that webs option is really nice, especially for banned Mightyena and getting Primeape armored to be able to spam Verdant Blessings and get that snowball rolling. So I think if we see the sticky web, we're definitely going to see Primeape armored being a recipient of that as well as Mightyena. Overall, I'm hoping that Rifk gives us a nice show and performance. That last Draft League showed that they have what it takes to take a bad situation and turn it into something good. They made it very far despite their circumstances, so I'm hoping that they do that once again, and I'm curious to see how this team fares. We are going to move on to the next team. Without darkness, you could not see light. And what is a good performance if you can't see the spotlight? Tricky Flowers, headed by the Great Masquerade. We have Violet's team, Violet returning to draft with a bang. Love this logo. It is so cute. It is vibes. It is just blissful. And I love seeing Warcast actually just relaxing in a bed of flowers. We usually see Warcast being the demolition Mon and the scary Mon. So seeing a very happy Warcast just brings a smile to my face. Love this little logo here. Want to shout that out. Mascot of Warcast and the Gastrodon Gambling Association on week 3 being their nemesis. Let's take a look at this team. Mega Goodra, Warcast, Electrode, Jirachi, Mantine, Diancie, Decidueye, Whirlipede, Enchantice, Greninja, Brionne, and Tranquil. Gonna get into the nitty gritty. This, I might need to fix the dock because Team 11 has shown to be... Yeah, Team 11 doesn't fully work for some reason. So let's just fix that real quick. Alright, we are now on Team 6. There we go. All right. Very even stat spread here. Nothing too low. HP being the lowest, but you have options in all regards. Special defense being the highest, especially bolstered by that Goodra Mega. All right, let's take a look at the speed tiers first. We have that 150, very coveted speed tier in this division, considering we have a lot of 130s and a 140. So this is the fastest Mon of the division so far, aside from Flymolky. So great Mon to have. You command speed with Electrode, and it is great for screens and offense. Also going into 122, 110, 100, and then 88 into the 70s and 50. Great spread out speed stat here. Trick Room, a little bit hard for this team if it has to face it, but I don't think there's any dedicated Trick Room teams on this division, so not a problem there. That 150 into 122 is quite the gap. The 130 is sitting up there. Only have to fear Electrode, but it's still a pretty decent spread, I would say, and Electrode is a nice top off to that spread. Let's take a look at the type chart. Rock being the biggest weakness here. You have Jirachi and Warcast as the ones who switch into Rock. I would say that the Rock weakness is actually not that bad because those are two very premier switch-ins to Rock. Edgequake can be a little bit of a problem because Jirachi can't take an Edgequake, and Warcast is neutral on ground, but its great defense makes it a little bit easier to switch into Rock. So I don't think the Rock weakness is as bad as you might think. Just curious, let's look at flying. We have Jirachi, Electrode, and Diancie. Flying seems fine. Fighting is actually handled really nicely. Wow. And the other one that tends to be lower is ground and ice. Let's look at ice. Once again, Jirachi being a great Mon there for the ice matchup. Enchantice and Greninja, they're not too bulky, but if it's a special ice move, Enchantice can take it. Not too shabby. I think Jirachi is definitely going to be something that comes quite a bit because of the fact that it has such a nice defensive profile, especially with Warcast. Let's take a look at the offensive pressure here. There's a lot of offensive pressure being exerted right off the bat. We have two physical powerhouses in Goodra Mega and Warcast. You don't want to take hits from them. Jirachi can go both ways. It can go defensive as well. Diancie kind of similar, although its Moonblasts hit very hard thanks to Fairy Aura. Enchantice and Greninja also hitting hard on the special side, with Greninja being able to go mixed. And the cheeky Swords Dance Decidueye or Nasty Plot paired with Sniper means that you have to be very careful of those critical hits. Overall, some nice offensive threats. I think that the biggest powerhouses are definitely on that top corner there with Goodra Mega and Warcast. Nothing really switches into Warcast easily. Mold Breaker, very great for plowing through things like Crocodobie. Fighting Ground in general, very nice for mons like Probopass as well that resist Edgequake. In terms of the defensive options, Mantine is a great pivot on this team, taking special hits very well. The physical powerhouses also have some nice physical defense, special defense higher on Mega Goodra, but I'm thinking precisely of Warcast. So being able to come in with Mantine versus with Warcast, it's actually a very nice duo there. And then we also have quite a bit of pivoting. We have Volt Switch, U-turn, 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 U-turn. Not sure if Whirlipede gets U-turn. I don't think it does. U-turn Tranquil as well. I'm kind of curious if we'll see Tranquil. Tranquil is a cool lower pick. So yeah, nice pivots to bring in mons, especially that Mega Goodra there. And Enchantice, you really want to bring in Enchantice with a slow pivot. So that is good for Enchantice. Let's see what the Z captains are. Z, any Enchantice. So yes, Enchantice does get the option to have that powerful Focus Blast in the form of a Z. It can do Z Hypnosis to raise its speed. Great Z captain. You know that the Z captains are stacked, the options, when Warcast and Jirachi don't even get their Zs. Lots of great abusers of Z on this team. Greninja, of course, being a premier one as well, being able to go with that Z Gunk Shot, for example. Overall, this team is pretty versatile and has a lot of tanks. Nothing seems particularly too passive here, and you have a lot of pivoting. I'm noticing that that's a trend on the Tauros division. A lot of the walls are not just walls, they're tanks. They're really nice in being able to facilitate that offense coming in. Let's talk about hazards really quickly, because I forgot to do that. We have Demolition for Warcast. I think even Goodra might have Demolition. I might be wrong. Yeah, no Demolition on Goodra. Spin on Electro, Defog on Mantine, Defog on Decidueye as well. In terms of setting, we have Rocks from Warcast, maybe? Question mark? Oh, actually, Warcast does not have Rocks. That's interesting. I didn't know I didn't have Rocks. Rocks on DNC and Jirachi. We have Spikes coming from Greninja. And what else do we have? Checking one more time because I think I saw more. Oh yeah, Spikes from Whirlipede and Toxic Spikes from Greninja and Whirlipede. So nice hazard options. I feel like Demolition Warcast will definitely come in clutch, especially in draft. In ladder, you have to really give up a move slot on Warcast, but in draft you could fine-tune those other three moves so that you could fit Demolition a little bit more easily. Rapid Spin Electrode being great for spinning because it can be a fast spin, so you could get rid of those hazards before dying. Of course, it also has Taunt to help with the hazard game. It's a great lead. You could go for screens on this team very easily. So I would say that decent hazard game, which is nice because you definitely want Enchantice not to have to come into Rocks. Overall, this is a very balanced team, I would say. Nice offensive capabilities and pivots, good hazard game, and handles its weaknesses pretty well. I really think that Violet is on the up and up. Ever since rejoining, there was a brief period where Violet had left. Ever since rejoining, I feel like Violet has just completely shown to be a different person, has learned and grown a lot, and I'm curious to see how they bring that into draft, how that experience goes into draft, and I feel like that has also made more planning and in-battle decisions better for Violet as well. So welcoming Violet, definitely a contender for that number 4 slot of the big 3 too. It's kind of a toss-up between Galaxy, Violet. I would say that Rifk and Ezla actually has proven to have that drive as well. So I'm really curious to see how this plays out, and maybe we'll crown a number 4 in this league, or maybe it'll still be a question. So welcome back, Violet, and show us all you got. We're going to move into the last team here. All right, we got the Bucket Buddies, and this is headed by Zqiggs, aka Pale Pal, nemesis of Passimiturn Man, who they will be facing in week 2. This is the last team we're going to look at, and this is our our draft villain this time around. Both oh, whoops. My sound kind of messed up a bit. My bad. Technical difficulties. The thing that happens with my headphones is that if I even so much as touch them, it'll be like, oh, they're gone. I'm gonna just have to fix that real quick. But while I fix that, Zqiggs was really the villain of the draft, doing not 1, but 2 very fatal snipes on other players, those being Terrazbula from Beater and Heatmore from Jooj, both low tier, really interesting mons that they wanted to use. So I'm curious to see how Zqiggs goes about using them. Hand-drawn, I believe, logo here. It's hard to see on the stream, but it's a little guide on how to steal a bank, which I find very cute and funny. Let's take a look at this team. Mega Haircross, Miss Magius, Drampa, Reuniclus, Corsola, Terrazbula, Whimsicott, Machoke, Chestnut Delta, Heatmore, Orneridge, and Manomoth. Alright, in terms of stats, pretty even spread, speed being the lowest. Let's take a look at those speed tiers. Alright, so topping off at 116 with a prankster as well. That is Whimsicott, and then we go down to 105. In terms of speed, this is definitely the most disadvantaged team. Everyone in this league seems to have gone for, or almost everyone, a 130 or above upper speed tier mon. So this team will be easy to outspeed. However, I will give a brief caveat to that. We have a webs setter in Terrazbula. Terrazbula, being actually a pretty fast bug, can set webs for this team, and it will want to abuse webs. We also have Heatmore with the new Kindle Burst, which is a first impression fire, Terrazbula with first impression, Prankster on Whimsicott, and Mach Punch Machoke now. So there are ways around that speed with priority, but it is the most disadvantaged speed chart for sure. The lower end can abuse Trick Room, and Reuniclus can set that up, so that's something to take into consideration. Machoke is actually a pretty good abuser with Eviomite. Drampa and Reuniclus go pretty hard in the Trick Room, and Corsola Hustle Choice Band is no slouch, let me tell you. It is a meme set, but it is a surprisingly decent meme set, so don't knock that out. The webs are definitely going to be something that this team wants a lot, because a lot of the abusers handled it really well. Manomoth being one of the premier abusers, getting that 90 speed patched up with the web's advantage and being able to fire off powerful creeping despairs and also sleep opponents first. You also have Heracross Mega, whose only big weakness is speed. Once that weakness is patched, Heracross Mega is a huge force. Ornridge being able to go banned with webs, probably still Scarf, but webs is pretty well geared for this team, I will say. Let's take a look at the type matchup. Once again, flying looks to be pretty tough here, although it is not as bleak as it seems. Ornridge, Chestnut Delta, and Corsola are great flying switch-ins, so despite the big weakness on the other mons, there are some great switch-ins to handle that weakness. Fairy, another one, but Chestnut Delta being one of the best Fairy switch-ins, just gotta be careful of the Fairy Ground duo, and I believe that this team is facing Serena Delta. Beater is not going to be scared to use offensive Serena Delta because he's the GOAT like that. We are looking at the Ice one next. Corsola, Chestnut, and Heatmore handling Ice. Not too bad a weakness. Finally, Steel. Steel, not too bad. There's not too many offensive Steels out there, and they are handled by Chestnut Delta and Heatmore, mostly Chestnut Delta, who seems to be a premier defensive pick on this team. With Intimidate as well. You can set up spikes and toxic spikes with Chestnut Delta, so we're going to move into hazards with that consideration in mind. Stealth Rock on Corsola, that is the main rocker of this team. You could also go Ornridge if you're going for bulky Ornridge or Rock's 3 attacks. In terms of removal, you have Defog Drampah, you have Defog Whimsicott, Defog Ornridge. This team does not have a spinner, I think. Yeah, just Defog and Demolition there. Sticky Web, of course, we mentioned with Terraspula, so good setters. I will say the removal situation, not favorable for a Sticky Web team because you really want to have Rapid Spinner Aggregate as an option at the very least for Sticky Web because of the fact that you want to maintain the webs on the opponent's side. You do have a spin blocker in Mismagius. Nothing to really abuse Defog in terms of the recipients of that, so like Defiant, for example, but you do have Creeping Despair, which could abuse Defog on Manamoth. Overall, I do think that this team would have liked a spinner or aggregate mon. Setting is pretty easy for this team, though. You have that Stealth Rock once again from Corsola. In terms of pivoting, you have Dry Pass from Corsola, you have U-Turn from Whimsicott, and U-Turn from Ornridge. That might be the only pivots. Let's take a look and see. Also U-Turn from Manamoth, and you have, of course, the Memento option, which is actually nice if you could get if you get webs up with Memento. That actually does pivot well into Heracross being able to set up, or into snowballing with Terraspula and Quiver Dancing with Manamoth. One thing I will say is that Terraspula is kind of pigeonholed into setting up sticky webs, which is tough on Terraspula because it really does like to abuse webs. It can do both, but it's a little wonky to get both in there, especially because you want to be able to boost up and then have 3 attacks for maximum coverage. Bug Grass isn't really great dual stab, so you really want that coverage. In terms of physical presence, Heracross Mega provides huge physical presence, and you can also go physical on Chestnut Delta. In terms of special... Oh, and Ornridge, let's not forget Ornridge. Special, Drampah has huge breaking capabilities. Mismagius, Reuniclus. So this team has some pretty good offensive options and utility. It seems like there's decent breakers with Heracross Mega and Drampah. And then there's also your speedy options in Mismagius and Ornridge, who famously does like to run Scarf. Overall, very interesting team, kind of eclectic. It does have a pocket Trick Room with Reuniclus, let's not forget that. And Drampah and Corsola can take advantage of that quite a bit. Chestnut could even as well. So overall, Zqiggs is known for kind of zany strategies, and I think that this team is set up for the strategies to be quite zany indeed. Let's take a look at those Z captains really quick. No heat, more notably, which means... Oh, interesting. Z attack Machoke. Huh. I was going to say Heatmore has its own signature Z, and that would have been cool to see. But I'm really curious what Z attack Machoke does. Huh. Ornerage, very nice for a Z any because you could do a Brave Bird without taking damage, and a Head Smash that won't miss. Earthquake is also very nice for it. So overall, very interesting and eclectic team from Zqiggs, and that is going to end our team analysis. I want to really quickly go back to just looking at the teams themselves. Looking at the team directory. In terms of, I'm going to say my favorites now. While I say that, I want those of you who are in the chat, leave your guess on whether heroes or villains will emerge victorious in this league. Who are you putting your money on? I'm going to give my favorites now. In terms of draft logo, there are so many good ones in this league. I am biased. I'm going to say that the Crystal Swords Crusaders is my favorite draft logo of them all. It is just so cute. The expression on Passimiturn, the way that Rex drew Passimiturn, and the lovely sunset in the background to show Crystal Shores off is just very, very nice. So I love it. But special shout outs to Radiant Wings and Tricky Flowers as well. In terms of who I think, favorite trainer sprite. I think favorite trainer sprite will actually go, and I don't have the trainer mural here yet because not all the trainer sprites were in time. Here we are with my favorite trainer sprite. Ignore the dead pixel. But I really like the trainer sprite for Ezla's Golisopod Guardian. Just an amazing trainer sprite. He spent a good deal of time on it, and I think that the Golisopod elements really merge in nicely. And all that leaves is my favorite team. Hopefully my internet won't die at this point like it did in the other video. But in terms of my favorite team, it's really hard because I feel like this division has such ironclad teams, generally speaking, that it's tough to pick a favorite. Looking at them one last time. I'm going to remove my bias, and I'm going to say that Beater's team is my favorite. I feel like this team just has so much swagger. It has great options in every regard, and it has a lot of mons that I am very excited to see used. So I think that this is my favorite team, but shout out to Galaxy because he has Mega Hypno, obviously. So yeah, actually I think that means that Heroes got the distinctions of favorites. I'm gonna put my money on Heroes, so villains, step up that game. I wanna see you villainous, I wanna see the evil laughter, I wanna see the clash of heroes and villains go hard. I personally am more on the hero side. I would have joined Heroes if I joined this league, but I want to see a great showing from both sides, and I think both sides will give us an amazing showing. So that is the final video for First Impressions. That is Tauros Division. We are going to see how it all shakes up here in Heroes vs. Villains Draft League in Festival Town, and get ready because the story and quest of this league will be coming around Matchup 2. I hope you have a lot of fun with it. Some cool things coming. And yeah, awesome teams, awesome theme, and you've all been great with this. So really excited for this league. Godspeed, and may the best hero or villain